Well, I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this or not, but I'm going to since we're here.
Okay.
The we haven't done a like guilty pleasures episode yet, I don't think, but I was as I'm waiting to get started on here, I should be like looking over notes or something, but I'm not. I'm watching the new season of Selling Sunset. I don't know
Oh,
if you watch
no.
any of those shows. So, they're like reality TV, high end real estate shows, and the drama of the people involved is just crazy, like a whole different world. And I know it's TV, I know it's, probably scripted and
Oh, yeah.
manufactured, but one question came up with one of the characters, or one of the actors is has just been told by another. This sounds so soap opera, but I promise there's a point. Has just been told by a frenemy that that she heard through somebody else that this woman's husband was seen with another woman.
Oh,
Ooh, big drama.
yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
wants to hear that for
No.
sure. But at first, they were the woman was thankful that her frenemy told her, because better to hear it directly than to
Yeah.
hear rumors or whatever. But then everybody kind of turns on this friend who, saying she must have staged it, or it's not her business to tell anybody. And I've always been fascinated by this. If somebody thought Rob was cheating on you,
Hmm.
would you want them to tell you, or would you want them to keep it a secret? Because they're going back and forth about what constitutes a good friend. Like, a good friend doesn't tell, like, doesn't
Um,
blow up someone's life.
I think that they need to be told. I think you need to say something because
I think you can be gentle about it, and I
Mhm.
think maybe you can confirm your information
Yeah.
before, make sure it's not just a rumor before you go. And but
Well,
man, I would be so upset if I found out my friends knew something and
yeah.
never told me,
Well, that's like
you know.
actually an episode on Jersey Shore where like these two characters, like they're not characters, I guess it's like reality TV too, but they're like in a relationship and like the guy goes to the bar and like two of the girls that live in the house catch him like making out with some other girl, and then they like struggle with like telling her, so they write a note, like they like go to the library and type out a note and like put it on her bed,
Before Chat GPT,
right?
yeah.
And so they wrote it out and they put it on her bed or whatever, and she finds it, and then she finds out. And it's like an ongoing thing. Like Clary has like a huge flag in her room, and it's like the letter. And it's like the whole letter is written out on this flag. But it's just something
Oh
like
yeah.
if you're a Jersey Shore fan, like you would know about the note. And it's like a huge deal. But like
Hmm.
they were mad, people were mad because they thought that they shouldn't tell him. And I'm thinking he like, or not tell him, sorry, tell her that he was cheating. And I think people need to know that. I think it
Yeah,
should be told.
yeah. I'd be so upset if
Yeah,
someone didn't tell me.
yeah.
Like, that's not really a good friend.
No. I mean, unless they're telling just to hurt you in like a way that's like not
Right,
appropriate,
right.
then that's different. But like, like if they're the ones that are like sending you a picture of them making out with your husband or, like whatever, like it's him and I,
Yeah,
like that kind of a thing. But yeah, I think you should be told. That's
yeah.
just my opinion.
Anyways, I don't know what had me thinking about that, but I was just watching this episode and I'm thinking, I don't understand. I don't understand that kind
Yeah.
of logic. It doesn't make any sense to me.
No.
Oh, don't tell because it's like you don't want to hurt the person. It's like, don't be such a weenie.
Yeah.
Like, people get hurt. You don't think it's going to hurt a lot more when they find out another way?
Well, I
It's
mean, or they just continue living this lie,
yeah,
like, or,
that's true.
get an STD. I don't know.
And what's to say the wife or the partner doesn't already know?
Yeah.
Maybe they have some sort of arrangement. We don't know these things.
Yeah.
People do. They have all kinds of agreements and plans. Who's to say?
Who's to say? Not me. I'm
Hmm.
not to say a thing. Yeah.
Nope. I remember once working night shifts, because I used to as well work in long-term care, and I worked for home care, so did a lot of night shifts in people's homes. And this was when I was very newly married, and I liked the night shifts because it was just quieter.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the clients saying to me, like, why aren't you at home at night, you should be home. And I said, well, this is when I work, I prefer to work at night or whatever. And I can't remember how she said it, but basically it was like, if you're not there with your husband, somebody else is.
Oh, love, thank
Like
you.
it's your responsibility to be there with him, and if you aren't going to, somebody else will.
Oh,
And I'm
that's,
like, well, if that's what he chooses, then have at her,
yeah.
because
Well,
I'm not fighting for a loser.
no, me neither. Like
No, thank you.
I actually just had this conversation with my oldest, like about, it's just one of those things. Like you just can't control it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do if somebody is that
Yeah,
way, right? Or in a situation where they feel it's okay to do that. Like it's just there's nothing you can do.
yeah,
And then you don't want to be with some. I mean, maybe you want to try and make it work. I don't know, but myself, I don't. You. It's better to know than spend another 15 years with somebody and be like, "Oh, it was a lie."
yeah.
you know?
Honestly,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I have a whole other family. Like nobody wants that.
Okay. I think Trev and I mean, we've been married so long, and we've had conversations like this. I've always it's we don't bury our head in the sand, but we're both at the stage where it's like, if somebody else or something else makes you happier, then go do it.
Hmm.
I wouldn't stand in his way. I mean, I would be really disappointed,
Yeah.
but I would never, at this stage of my life, never fight for somebody who didn't want
No.
to be a part of something. Like,
Hmm.
who has the energy for that?
Nobody.
And you see this sort of, maybe they're a bit stereotypical women, and I mean, I am talking out of my ass because I haven't had this experience, and so it's easy for me to sit on this side of the podcast
Uh huh.
and say what I would or wouldn't do. And so I just really want to say, like, I understand that people's experiences are very unique, but I just know for my own self, I never understood women who would beg to be in
Hmm.
a relationship and beg. I get it when you're teenagers, right? And you're like
Oh yeah.
in you're all just figuring it out, whatever. But when you're older, and women just feel that they have to jump through hoops to keep a man, or
Hmm.
to, I don't get that.
I
I
don't
I
either.
guess because both had pretty solid relationships, and
Hmm.
it was never about chasing each other. It was very much about, like, mutual respect and
Yeah.
mutual friendship and wanting to spend time together. It was
Hmm.
not those just things just never came up in
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. Like I mean,
So
I
it's kind
think
of hard to understand.
I'm there. I mean, there's obviously been situations in my life that like I can't wrap my head around, like certain people or whatever, or just certain situations that are, borderline crossing the line. And, I just I don't understand that. But I mean, there's nothing I can do. And I'm certainly not, I don't have the time. I
Mm.
barely have enough time or energy to get up to go to the bathroom. Like I'm not going to sit here and be like, pick me, pick me. Like I'm not going to do that. If you don't want to be with me, then don't. Like,
Yeah,
like I don't, to me, it's
yeah,
irrelevant. Like, I don't need to wave a flag and have fireworks for you to notice me. Like you either want to be here or you don't. I
yeah.
think at this
And
point it's just a choice.
it's true, and I think when people have that choice, or realize they have that choice all the way through. I mean, it's so much different, or more difficult, when you have young kids at home. I mean, I know you're in that, and
Hmm.
I'm through it, but I do remember that being, you didn't even have time to think about
Yeah.
what you even wanted, right? Let
Hmm.
alone, I remember after our kids were gone and Trev and I were starting to hang out more just on our own, and we didn't have the same responsibilities. We actually went out camping for a couple few weeks, with just the idea of, let's see what we still have to talk about. Let's
Yeah.
see if that friendship is still there the same way it used to be, because you don't
Yeah.
really know
Yeah.
if all that time has gone by. And I remember, because I have had, I guess, what I would call extreme thinking. So
Hmm.
I can swing all the way one way or all the way. So I can
Yeah.
go from being really frustrated and angry and like nothing works, and like
Yeah.
throw the baby out with the bathwater, to complete and full forgiveness
Yeah.
when there's been no accountability and no actual, understanding of the situation. It's almost like, let's throw it, bury it under the rug, because that's just easier, right?
Yeah.
And you learn these habits, and when you're really busy with family and kids, and even if you don't have kids, that sort of middle stage of life is just very, it's just very functional.
Hmm.
And I remember talking to a therapist, and her saying to me something like, Raylene, what if it wasn't so extreme? Like, what if you can be super upset and super angry or super disappointed about this thing, this situation, but it's not marriage ending, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad person because you feel like that, and it doesn't mean that you have to swing all the way to the other side, and just like, what if it could be both? Like,
Yeah.
what if both things are true? And I remember being like, what the hell are you talking about? like,
Yeah.
it was like a concept that hadn't been ever in my brain. Like, I had
Mhm.
never really considered that it didn't have to be so big on either side. And
Yeah.
I've thought about that even with relationships, with friendships, or my siblings, or, where, I mean, I've always been that kind of person to maybe be accused of being over dramatic
Mhm.
or overly sensitive. And certainly there's some truth to the overly sensitive part just from childhood, right? It's
Yeah.
always been a bit of my nature. But really thinking a little bit deeper about what being over dramatic means, or is it just that I feel or felt like my um, expression of emotion had to be so big in order to be heard,
Mhm.
when really, if I dialed it back 20%, I would still be heard. And maybe that would make everybody, including myself, feel better,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of
Yeah.
something I'm still really learning about. But
Mhm. I find that like I'm an emotional person in a different way cuz like I don't think I've ever had a problem being heard my whole life, or being validated. Like I've been, like I mean, I had a pretty solid one-on-one relationship. Like I didn't have my siblings around growing up because they were off with my parents and I lived with my grandparents, right? And so I had
mm,
I had a lot of attention and focus on just myself. So I guess maybe that's a bad thing now because I feel like everybody's focus and attention should be on me all of the time. So, I think that might be a little bit of the negative, but to me it's whatever. You know, but yeah, like
that's our t-shirts. Remember, we're
yeah.
gonna get the t-shirts made that they're I'm effing delightful.
Yes, because it's true. Everybody over
Yeah.
here. But I mean,
Yeah.
so I
Me, look at me, look at me.
yeah, right here, right here. I so I'm an emotional person a different way. But I get emotionally frustrated. And so like not a running joke, but a joke kind of like when I talk with my mom because I'm very emotional with certain things and I'll phone my mom and I'll be like upset and crying about something. And she'll be like, just stop that right now. And I'm like, I can't help it. And so then I always bug her and I'm like, you're so emotionless. And she's like, well, you have enough for the both of us. So, but yeah, like I think, yeah, like I see it in a different way, but I can understand when you're not being heard that it gets frustrating and emotional. And
Yeah.
I think,
I think it's the dynamic, right? I remember being so frustrated once with Trevor, like so upset that I took a coffee cup and I threw it at the floor.
uh huh.
And like, I'm not a violent, there's no physical
No.
altercations. I'm pretty much a pacifist, right?
Yeah.
Whatever. But this coffee cup, it was forever the shame right up until the day we moved out of that house, or right close to it, because that, it cut the linoleum
Oh,
in the kitchen floor. And so that mark was always there until we moved out. We had to, like, Trevor had to replace that little square in the floor of this like ripped linoleum because I had like a big hissy fit
yeah.
and threw a coffee cup at the floor.
Yeah.
I don't even think the coffee cup broke, but it
Oh,
somehow like
it just,
just nudged that enough. But
yeah, I think I've done two things like that. One time, like I used to smoke like 13 years ago. My husband smokes. He's trying to quit, so he vapes, but he used to roll his smokes and like roll them. And so we would have this giant tub of tobacco. And like one night, things just weren't going the way they should. And I got so mad that I whipped that and hit it and like the lid popped off and there was like tobacco everywhere.
oh
So then I was
no.
even more mad because that stuff is expensive. you know, like that's not cool. So I was like more mad at myself because it was like, what are you doing? Like I was trying to like prove a point and it just totally backfired, you know?
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I remember the kids were little, I don't know, and I stayed home for most of the time, and so I was always trying to look at how to save money. I mean, try to do things cheaply. And Trevor was an artist, not like he made a lot of money, so trying to do my part, whatever.
Yeah.
So I buy this giant, like, 40-pound box of peaches, and I'm going to make peach jam.
Mhm.
And have I told you this story before?
Nope.
I'm not sure.
I can only
So
imagine
I'm
though.
starting on, and I have the whole ADHD thing where you can start something, and then partway through, that's when you realize, oh no, I've bitten off more than I can
Yeah.
chew. But whatever, I'm through these. The peaches are cooking. I've got this big vat in it, but the kitchen's exploded, right? Because I
Yeah.
probably didn't know that you had to peel every,
Oh yeah.
peach, and like it's all they're messy, and I've got little kids around or whatever. And I was so frustrated, so overwhelmed. And I remember Trevor coming in the kitchen, and he looks around and he's like, "How much is a jar of peaches?" And I lost my ever loving mind. I went ballistic. I took this giant boiling vat of peach schmutz
Yeah.
and I flung the whole thing into the garbage can.
Yeah.
And I mean, that poor guy, like,
Oh yeah.
he didn't even like peach jam, but
Yeah.
all it took was like, how much is a jar of peaches? And
And it
I
was
was
like
just like,
it's
I had a
on.
total meltdown. It was like all that work for nothing because I threw it all in the
Yeah.
garbage.
Yeah, well sometimes your
Oh,
emotions get the better of you and like it shouldn't get that far, but sometimes stuff happens, right? Like it just yeah. I mean, this isn't
emotional regulation. I don't even know if kids these days learn about that. You see
mhm.
adults that have no idea how to do that,
Yeah.
right? One of the biggest lessons and is for people, for my kids, for myself, was learning how to apologize.
Mhm.
Like, how do you actually just apologize in a way that is truthful, and I feel like people get stuck, and my
Yeah.
kids, it's I see people their age out there too, and I don't even know how people, you see these, people just flying off the handle,
Yeah.
and they don't seem to think through much, and yeah, it's
Well,
tough.
I know this isn't like about parenting, but like I was at work one time and something had happened and I worked by myself. So it's not like I had any way to sort of like talk to like a coworker about it or kind of express myself and I was so mad that I grabbed my checklist and I put like the biggest check marks on everything, like as if somebody was gonna notice, but it was like just a checklist that I looked at and my boss looked at. But I was like, I checked it off with like I was mad. Like I was so mad and I slammed the book shut and I put it up in the cupboard and I go to turn and I wear flip-flops 99% of my time on this earth. And I catch my toe on the desk and I
Oh
split
no.
it open and in that moment, I sat there and I was reflecting and I was like, was it really worth that much anger? Like really was it that like worth it? Like just take a deep breath next time. Like you don't need to get so out of control, but my toe was bleeding and there's blood everywhere. So I was even like just more mad, but then I was trying to breathe through it, right? But it's just sometimes
Yeah,
it boils over and you do
yeah,
something that's completely inappropriate. I mean, nobody saw
I
mine, so
remember.
it's not like it made a point or anything.
It didn't wasn't a teachable moment for anybody else other than you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called just take
Mm,
a minute. Just
yeah,
just take a
just
minute.
breathe. You're okay.
Yeah, we don't
I think as I get older, though, I feel really different than I used to. Like, I
yeah.
just don't feel like I have the highs and the low lows the way
Mhm.
I used to, or the volatility. I don't know.
Yeah.
I used to have that sort of circular, fixated type thinking when I was upset with somebody, or
Mhm.
some situation happened, and I could ruminate on it. It was almost like my drug.
Uh-huh.
I could ruminate on it. You could go talk to your friends, phone everybody,
Yeah.
tell everybody about it. um, and I think at some point I just got tired. I just
Yeah.
got tired of doing that and realized there's no point. It's not helping me. It's not making me feel any different. And one thing, I mean, this is maybe a little off topic, but I guess it was probably about 5 years ago. I had a bit of a cancer scare.
Oh.
And so there's a period of time in there where you're waiting for the doctor to give you any sort of result. You don't really know.
Mhm.
Um, I'm the kind of person who probably goes down every dark and twisty pathway of what that could look like,
Yep.
where Trevor would just not want to talk about it at all because in his mind there is nothing to talk about. We
Yeah.
haven't heard anything. We don't
Yeah.
know anything. So he's not going to, which is very infuriating, by the way, when
Oh,
you want to like get into it and you want to like plan your funeral and
uh-huh.
somebody else is like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And it's like, what are you talking about? This isn't about you.
Yeah, it's
This
all
is
about
about me.
me. Like,
You know?
wake up.
But because I didn't have that outlet and I wasn't sharing, even some of our kids didn't know at that time because of just the timing of it and their age and things like that. Um, I did find that I had to really figure out how to manage those emotions alone. And
Mhm.
it was I'm really grateful for the skill now,
Yeah.
but it was hard to learn. And what it ended up being was certainly going for walks because it sounds so trivial, but I just needed to get out of the place where my feelings and thoughts would ruminate, which was at home,
Yeah.
and get outside, look at something else. But I really started to like just take the deep breaths in and then out, like in through the nose, out through the mouth as I was walking.
Yeah.
But what I ended up imagining was every breath of like medicine air would go in,
Mhm.
and when I exhaled, it would be any poisonness in me,
Yeah.
right? And it was just like
Yeah.
visual, and it but it's what kept me from having those really dark thoughts and
Mhm.
spiraling. And it's something I do now. You know, if I start to feel anxious or overwhelmed, or anxiety is sort of, or panic is starting to creep up, or the circular thinking, it's
Yeah.
something I will sort of instinctively now remember to just take
Mhm.
that breath in, let it out, you know, feel the for lack of a better term, like cancer cells exiting my body. And I
Yeah.
remember talking to an First Nation elder about this once, and she said, "Oh, you know, what did you do with that negative air? You
Mhm.
know?" And I'm like, breathed it out. I don't
Yeah.
know, like. And she says, "Well, did you put a offering or pray over that because you're putting that negative
Yeah.
poisonous air out, it's also landing somewhere." So she also taught me that it was my responsibility to make sure that was not landing on
Mhm.
somebody else in a negative way. It sounds a little weird if you don't, you know, and I'm just learning some of that
Yeah.
stuff, but it was a good way to almost be mindful of it, and a good way to take responsibility for the types of feelings we have and what we're going to do with them. And that
Yeah.
was even in more of a tactile way or a visceral way,
Mhm.
that exercise really showed me that.
Yeah, like myself, not that I mean it wasn't me, it was my kids, but like when we were getting ready to find out about Lincoln, it actually took like a year and a half for us to find out what was wrong with
Mm,
him. And in that process, just one time I had heard the words ataxia telangiectasia and blew it off. And
mm,
the one neurologist actually said, "Hey, like I can't help you. I have no idea what's wrong with your kid. I'm going to pass you off to somebody else." And so we got passed off to a different neurologist, and she actually was like on the board in Israel for ataxia telangiectasia. Anyhow, so she was like, "I'm sending you for this test or this test." She said the words, and again I blew it off. Well, in that period of time, we went and saw a different doctor, and he says we think that it's ataxia telangiectasia. So like we had a group of doctors who are working together, right? And so I
mhm.
said, could you just write that down? And it was the
Yeah.
first time I had asked to hear it or to have it. And of course, um I can't not look into stuff. I'm
Yeah.
I have to. And so I went home and I actually
You're
looked
a
it up.
human.
Yeah, and I looked it up, and I mean, granted it was a big mistake, but it also like the list of
Mm,
stuff that I was like, this really sounds like him. But in that moment,
mm,
I phoned our neurologist and I was like, I need you to tell me what's wrong with my kid right now. Like I can't. I'm not doing this. I'm not waiting forever. And she actually phones me the next day and she's like, we'd like you to come in at like 8:30 in the morning. And Rob couldn't get out of work to come with me.
mm,
And so I ended up going by myself. And that is the moment when I was like learning how to deal with those emotions on your own, right? It's like
mm,
it's so much all at one time and you're like over processing it and trying to be calm and then you're trying to be calm for your kid and you're trying to not, you know, and So, yeah, like I can relate to that sort of like the scare of it and then like overthinking it and then thinking about the negative and all those things. And it's just, that
Mhm.
was probably the biggest one for me. Like even now, like, a lot of times I try to like not have my kids see that because it's just, it's my
Mhm.
own emotions, right? Like I don't need them to see me freaking out about stuff, right? But, but yeah, that was like the first time I think I had to like kind of learn how to like breathe it in and hold it in and like not get so worked up about it, even though like of course I got on the phone after like my kid was like sleeping in the car and we're driving, and then that's when I started phoning people, because I didn't want
Yeah.
it, like I was freaking out. But it's just, yeah, like I mean, I think
Yeah.
anxiety, depression, like all those kinds of things, like you kind of learn how to deal with them in different
Mhm.
ways, even though you deal with them all the time. Like I think sometimes it's also circumstances, right? And how you deal with
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, it's so interesting how people sort of choose to manage, right? I know for years and years, people talk about getting a therapist or like that
Hmm.
was, but for a long time that was not looked at as a positive thing, right?
No.
It was like you deal with your shit or
Hmm.
you hide it or you know, worst case scenario, you go talk to your priest or pastor, but
Uh-huh.
you don't get therapy. So it's
No.
funny because like our generation was a little bit like that, but my kids generation they've normalized therapy, right? Whether
Oh
they all
yes.
go to it or not, but their
Yeah.
friends, like it's just very, it's almost more, it's just the reason a lot of people don't do it or young people aren't doing it isn't because they don't agree with it or don't think they need it, it's because they can't afford it.
Oh,
It's
it's
very
so
expensive.
expensive. Yeah.
And if you don't have some sort of plan, which most young people and a lot of just regular people don't have plans, you can't do it. And I
No.
remember um, after my mom died was a really hard time for me. I remember Trevor asking me, do you need to talk to somebody? And I was doing coaching. Like I kind of felt like I was pretty emotionally intelligent. I felt like I understood, but you don't understand yourself the way you could understand somebody else,
Yeah.
right? It's a sometimes a hard lesson to learn. We don't treat ourselves as gently or as kindly as we would other people. And I remember him saying, do you think you need to see somebody? And I just kind of said no, like I think I've self-diagnosed. I
Yeah.
feel like I know what I'm doing. And a little while later, I actually with something with my work, I had decided to talk to a therapist who was um, working with a group of coaches that I was working with. So she was kind of one of our colleagues, but she had a like a psych degree or whatever. And so I decided to talk to her about this work thing.
Hmm.
Well, that woman, just it was just the simplest thing. Like she was not getting in there and trying to figure things out. She was really going but wherever I would lead or wanted to go. But it became so interesting that even just a simple shift in perspective from somebody else can
Hmm.
change and open up everything. And since then, I've gone to another therapist who I really loved, and she helped Trev and I really understand a new communication style
Hmm.
because of like the extreme thinking or not understanding sort of the middle ground or being too all or nothing in certain situations. And it was just, we've been together since we were 12 years old. Like, yeah, we've established some patterns that might not
Uh-huh.
be as the most healthy or might not be the most effective. And so, kind of having her talk us through a little bit of that and give us some alternative ways of communicating with each other was just fascinating actually for
Hmm.
both of us. We're like, we just didn't know, like what a
Yeah.
great kind of new way to look at something. And since then, I know I'm hogging the mic, so I'm gonna let you jump in, but it sort of progressed to I have and will talk about this, and I it's a big part of what I've been going through is coming from our grandparents, like, and coming from quite a religious background. All of us were raised pretty religious, and I've left organized religion and still feel like there's a creator, feel like all that, I feel like I'm good that way. But I really started to realize that religion was more of a business, and
Yeah.
I wasn't aligned with that at all.
Hmm.
And so I've been on this, like, just learning about the sort of spirituality, different kinds of practices, just more out of curiosity, things like that. But I ended up talking to an Indigenous therapist,
Mhm.
and she does a lot of her work through Indigenous teachings, the Lakota teachings, which is they're a Plains tribe, which is where my family is not Lakota, I don't think, but it's sort of in that area, the Plains.
Okay.
And so some of the teachings are very similar to ones I've heard or learned. And when I started talking to her about, different way of understanding dreaming, a different way of understanding deep rest, and of forgiveness of yourself, like I think it's the thing about therapists is it's just a different way of looking at something.
Mhm.
I think we get very fixated on the way we have learned
Yeah.
and don't always realize that I would have never thought there was other ways to manage. I didn't know my thinking was extreme.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know it was actually, making me more anxious than it needed to until someone pointed it out and just
Mhm.
said, "Yeah, I think there's another option that you haven't considered." And I'm like, "What? Wait a second. That actually works."
Yeah. I've always sort of just I don't know, like I talk to my mom all the time and I always feel like that's my outlet and it's like I don't need any advice because I'm well aware of the situation that I'm in, right? So I always like just play it off. But I also think to myself like I'm like I don't want to go and talk to somebody about this because I live it every day, right? So it's like I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
sit here and like open up and like, talk about those things and, all that kind of stuff and it's just like I I know I probably should because I went into like the fat clinic and the one doctor there was um like you need to go on meds because you're clearly like emotional when it comes to talking
Mm-hmm.
about your kids and I'm like that's true. Like I talk about them and I get weepy and like you know
Mm-hmm.
and so she's like you need to go on meds and so I was like okay and then she's like so I think you need a different kind of therapist like the therapist here at the clinic, I don't think it's gonna be able to help you. And I was like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay." And so I got kicked out of the fat clinic. It doesn't really matter, but I got kicked out and I was like, "This is so stupid," because I came here for help
Mm.
and clearly I don't know. But I so anyhow, I
Yeah,
sort of
they weren't hearing you.
no, she definitely was not. And like I did everything that she told me to do. And because I hadn't been on meds, she was like, go on meds. Let's get you, like, let's get your brain right and get you kind of on the right track. And then we'll like, we'll deal with the nutritionist and all this stuff. And then I come back in after being on the meds for a month and she's like, I don't think this clinic is right for you. And I was like,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
clearly I think you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. So,
Yeah,
like I got
that's not very supportive.
no, and I said that to her. I was like, I came here for help, and you're going to kick me out because you think I can't be helped, but you're not helping me. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm.
So, but yeah, so I've never really actually talked to a professional. I mean, I do let all of this stuff out. I talk to Rob, I talk to my mom, and, you know, like those safe spaces I find, to,
I would definitely say it's not the same.
yeah. Oh, I know,
It's not
I
because
know it isn't.
I feel like I thought exactly the same way you do. I think especially when you're pretty emotionally intelligent, like in tune with your feelings
Hmm.
and bright, like both of us are talkers and we're not
Yeah.
kind of ashamed or shy to talk about the real things we need to talk about.
Yeah.
But there was something that was different with, because I never felt like I went to the therapist and unloaded all my
Yeah.
shit. I never felt like that. In fact, I was probably pretty guarded about
Hmm.
like there's a lot of stuff I don't feel I need to talk
Yeah.
about. But they just a good one has the way of asking the gentle questions in a
Hmm.
way that doesn't feel like you have to unpack and doesn't feel like you're there to unload and that they're just
Mhm.
like popping the popcorn to
Yeah.
listen to your story, right? And
Yeah.
and I'm not, I feel like people do if anybody ever goes to a therapist or ever talks to somebody like that, it's in their own time when it
Mhm.
makes sense for them, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody has different kinds of support systems
Yeah.
I feel like we've talked about this, like Rob and Trevor, we kind of have really supportive men in our
Mhm.
lives that really
Yeah.
are pretty emotionally intelligent, right?
Yeah.
So I feel
Well,
like I got to the point where, and Trev and I noticed this about each other's, we were sort of using each other as the therapist, and we
mhm.
realized that that was becoming unhealthy,
Yeah.
that we were now kind of in a a pattern that was really hard to break.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah,
tough.
and I think that that's the thing too is like you said, like we have supportive partners, but I mean, like I'm also very fortunate I have supportive family. And then I
Mhm.
also have like a group of really great people who've like rallied around my kids. So like we're all so very fortunate in many different ways. Like I'm not just left by myself to sort of like manage these emotions, or I don't have anybody to talk
Yeah.
to, or I'm shamed because, well, except for my mom, you know, telling me I'm too emotional, but she does it jokingly. But like I feel like I'm okay, like I can get that out, and I'm sure I should probably
Yeah.
talk to somebody, but I also don't think that I need to talk
Yeah,
to
I
somebody.
feel like it's just no, and
Yeah.
it's if and when.
Yeah.
You don't have to decide that. You'll if it ever comes up and you want to, you will,
Yeah.
right? And
And I mean,
you'll find the right person, and if not, like that, you do have a good support
yeah.
system.
But I mean, like we did that for
Mhm.
our oldest. Like we went and got her somebody to talk to, because obviously dealing with a situation with your siblings is a lot to carry for a kid.
Especially as the oldest, yeah.
Well, and the thing is too is I mean, like it's something that like, you don't really pay attention to when you have to lug them with you to the doctor's appointments where they're hearing all of these things that they shouldn't be hearing. And you don't think about it
Mhm.
until after. Like I put her in situations that like as a young parent, I didn't realize that, it wasn't appropriate for her to hear some of these things. So that's a lot of baggage for her to carry, right? And then to deal
Mhm.
with the actual diagnosis and all of those things, it's a lot. It's a lot for a kid,
Yeah, yeah.
and so like we did, like, and I mean, I've put in the time for her, to go and talk to people and, like kind of deal with her emotions and stuff like that. And, because it
Mhm.
hasn't been easy. And,
Mhm.
I think it's good for her to talk to somebody else because she doesn't always just open up to our family, and, she kind of keeps things in. And so I felt like that was a really good safe space for her to talk about the things that
Mhm.
she felt or that she wanted to get off her chest. And,
Yeah.
I thought it was good for
And
her.
man, our kids are just so much braver than we
Mhm.
were.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's
so much
true.
braver.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Uh,
it's
I'm
crazy.
so
Like, you
impressed by them all the
yeah,
time.
I know. I feel the same way. Like, both of my able-bodied kids are like, like we were at my sister's wedding, and like Cleary's out there dancing with Bentley. Bentley's in her wheelchair, and Cleary's out there dancing and just having this really great time with Bentley. And of course, Bentley is a typical 11-year-old, and she was like, "I'm embarrassed," and sitting there in her chair. But Cleary's dance,
Yeah.
because Cleary's like me; she just
Yeah.
doesn't give a shit at all. Like she's just out there to have a good
Yeah.
time, and she's got this amazing personality, and she just does whatever she wants. And she's out there dancing with Bentley. And afterwards, I had a family member come up to me and they're like, "Oh my goodness, your daughter is absolutely amazing." I sat in the back of this room and cried because it was just so amazing to see her. And it's like,
Aw.
both of my kids are so good with their siblings. Like I couldn't ask for, them to have a
Mhm.
better brother and sister. Now, my youngest boy, like he is one in a trillion, that kid. Like he's so good. Um but I mean, with Cleary, I just felt that, with her, she needed that safe space.
Yeah. Well, and it's good as a parent to recognize that, right? And offer that when it's needed. I know there's times I wanted to offer it to my kids and I
Hmm.
just couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
I feel bad for parents who want, or
Uh-huh.
anybody who really wants the help and can't find it.
Well, and I was
It's kind
fortunate.
of a messed up system that way.
It really actually is, and I was fortunate because like my husband's work, like through our benefits, they offered it.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
actually a program in our town, and so there was a counselor in town here that we went to. And then of course the school,
Nice.
the school had brought in a counselor for her, an outside counselor, just because everybody
Mm,
like knows us and our situation. And
yeah.
so like they've
Yeah.
all been really helpful. Like I've never had to struggle to try and find resources or help, for the kids. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's been really great. And so she was really fortunate to have that. And I know a lot of people just do not. So something
Mm-hmm.
that I say to my youngest, I'm like, if you don't want to talk to me about it and you don't want to talk to your dad about it, you have aunts and uncles and a nanny and a grandma and a grandma. There's enough people here that you can go to if you're
Mm-hmm.
feeling like you need to talk to somebody. And then we can take those steps, right? Like
Yeah.
to try
Yeah.
and help that. But it's, yeah, it's not available for everybody, and it's very frustrating because mental health is, it's an issue, and
Yeah.
we
Mental
don't have
health and
that.
dentists, that should always be covered.
Well, you want to know what?
You shouldn't have to.
Well, you shouldn't. And it's actually something that I was told like years ago. Um, the reason why your head and your teeth are not taken care of is it has something to do with religion and your mind. When you have a mental disorder, it was back in the day, you were like classified as like, a witch or a, whatever. And so like you
Possessed.
were like
Hmm.
prosecuted for that. And so like over the years, that this is what I was told. Now, I mean, I haven't checked into it, but it does make sense that, you know, your head and your all of this was like separated from your body and the health of your body.
Hmm.
So, and I think
Hmm.
that it's ridiculous in my mind. I think
Interesting.
if you have bad teeth, you're going to have bad health. If you have a bad mind, you're going to have bad health. Like it's just, you need to
Hmm.
take care of those things, right? I think it's
Yeah.
important and it should be available for
Yeah.
everybody. So, yeah, I could see your frustration not being able to find that for your kids. And
Yeah. Yeah. Especially different times they needed
hmm,
it, you know. Now that they're older, they're sort of making their own pathways, and
yeah,
I think they pressured us in many ways, and pressured in a really good way, but
hmm,
they were the example when they started getting therapy, talking about it, talking about their friends, you know, and pointing out really gently, like pointing out ways of like that maybe dad isn't the person to talk to all the time about that, or you know, maybe there should be some outside. And I'm forever grateful for that, because I feel
hmm,
like it did open up like my mind a little bit to alternatives that I just hadn't considered.
yeah,
And I think it was kind of freeing that way.
hmm,
But
yeah.
anyways, are we going to go to the basement today? Do we have any good stories? Do we have anything to talk about with the cousins? Hey
Um,
cuz, are you going to join us?
I don't know. We can go down there. I don't really know
Mm,
if we want to creep down there or not. Do you want to? Like tiptoe?
I mean, hey, I showed up. I'm ready.
Okay,
What
but you know,
are you doing? You look like a little squirrel.
we're just gonna
You go
like
down
we're gonna
into the
shuffle on
basement.
down. We're gonna
We're gonna scooch on down.
yeah,
We're gonna tumble down those stairs
we
into the dark
are.
basement.
Um
Yeah, grab your blankie.
yes, grab your blankie and a stiff
Hmm.
drink,
And your
so,
favorite cousin.
and your favorite cousin so you can
Kind of sounds weird,
yeah.
but you know what I mean.
Mhm.
Nothing creepy.
So this story that I'm sharing is actually it's not so much like creepy or anything like that, but it is about a family that that lived in British Columbia. And actually one of
Mm.
our followers had actually posted it on one of our posts, and I actually was like I wanted to go and check into it, and like I was intrigued by it and stuff like that. So I went and found out some information on it. And so it is about the Jack family disappearance. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, do you remember that? Like yeah, I was like,
Yeah,
I want
I
to
know this
check.
one. Yeah.
Yes. And so on August 2nd, 1989, the Jack family, Ronald, Jack, 26, his wife, Doreen, 26, and their two sons, Russell and Ryan, vanished without a trace from Prince George, British Columbia. Despite extensive investigations, their whereabouts remain unknown, making it one of the most perplexing cases in Canadian history. I just never heard of it. Ron and Doreen, uh, Jack, were seeking stable employment to support their family. On the evening of August 1st, 1989, Ron was reportedly at a local business in Prince George when he met an unknown man who offered him a job. The man claimed there was work available at a logging camp near, is it Chetwin? Is that how you say it? Chetwin?
I
Is
think
it
so.
Chetwin, British Columbia? And that Ron could bring his family along as long as they would. Oh, sorry, as there would be employment for his wife Doreen in the camp's kitchen as well. The offering was enticing as it promised to help the family out. Excited by the opportunity, Ron called his mother later that evening to inform her the job offer and their plans to leave early next morning. This was the last known contact the Jacks had with anyone. The family was seen packing their belongings into their truck and leaving their home in the early hours of August 2nd, 1989. The Jack family was never seen or heard from again. Their home in Prince George was left undisturbed with no signs of foul play. Their bank accounts were never accessed. The family's truck, a 1989 blue and silver GMC pickup, also disappeared and has never been located. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched an extensive search for the family, investigating the logging camps where they were supposedly heading, but found no evidence that such a camp or job had ever existed. The identity of the man who approached Ron at the local business has never been determined. Over the years, numerous theories have emerged about what might have happened to the Jack family, ranging from foul play to the possibility that they met in an accident in the remote wilderness. However, without concrete evidence, the case still remains open and unsolved. So the disappearance of the Jack family has deeply affected the community of Prince George and the surrounding areas. Despite the passage of time, this case is still actively investigated by the RCMP and it remains one of Canada's most enduring mysteries. So that's
Hmm.
just like, where did they go? You know?
That's yeah, it's so crazy because like four people and a truck, and like the fact that the truck has never been seen,
Yes.
like I don't even my brain doesn't even know how to process something like that.
No.
Like does somebody like off the family and then paint the truck? Is the truck in the bottom of a river somewhere?
Well, and
Like
that's
I guess if it's remote, it could have been as something as simple as, not simple, but like
yeah.
driving off the road into a
Hmm.
and accidentally into a river, and it's
Yeah.
staying there. I don't
Yeah.
know. That's so
It
scary.
is. It is scary. It's like one of those things. It's like, you think you're setting out on an adventure, and then like you're doing something to change your life, and it's you're getting ready to do that, and then all of a sudden something bad happens, and then nobody sees you again.
Yeah. Did you see any info on like if there's been any developments
So,
or
like, the last I
or
read was that it was just still open, and but of course over time, right? Like, leads dry up, people's memories fade, people pass away, right?
Mhm.
So a
Yeah.
lot of those things, they sort of like dissipate, and they're not there when you go to keep investigating it. But it just seems so strange. Like, somebody knows something, whether it be the Jack family or somebody who did something, right? Like, it's you know,
Yeah.
and I think it's very
Yeah, well, and the
unfortunate.
family. I
Yeah.
mean, the family, that must be so awful not knowing. I mean, it's bad enough if you find out a family member has died
Mhm.
or worse, died in some like nefarious way, but
Mhm.
just to not know anything,
Well, and
and
too,
your
like,
little grandbabies, that'd
yeah.
be so awful.
Oh, I couldn't. I think that that's
Mhm.
one of the biggest things that scares me is having somebody go missing, like a not knowing, and that just
Mhm.
constantly being a part of your life, right? Like, that not knowing is just, yeah, like, I think it's
Yeah.
terrifying, and
I think there is a podcast called uh um come on, what is it? I think it's called Somebody Knows Something.
oh,
I think
okay.
that's a podcast or a show, but I think it's a podcast called Somebody Knows Something.
Mhm.
And I think it is going through cases like that to
Yeah.
try to find more information or to give us more information. But
Well, even
yeah,
just to
those.
drum up, like, even somebody remembering something,
Mhm.
or something triggering a memory, right? It's
Yeah.
like, it's so important to have closure, no matter what it be, right? Like, you want to know.
Well, and we have not started on this podcast amateur sleuthing side gig
Mhm.
where we go investigate crimes or cold cases, but there I just saw uh I think it was a TikTok or a YouTube video or something of a woman who her business, and this is like current 2024, her business is she has one of the biggest databases of missing people in Canada, and
Oh,
so she
wow.
has like maps that pinpoints and something. But the TikTok or the video started by saying, "Is there a serial killer in Nanaimo?" And we do hear, it this part of Nanaimo is not that great.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crime and
Mhm.
whatever. But the so she's going on and they've pinpointed I think it's I think it's 6 different women over the course of 2 years, just in this one stretch of highway or area near me. And the thing that makes them think that it might be a serial killer is the demographic of these women is very unusual. They're all established middle-aged women
Oh,
that
wow.
have families, that have ties to the community, and they're just gone, and their vehicles are empty. They have no
Wow.
trace of what happened to these women. And she says, we really hate to use the word serial killer because very often it's not. Very often it's just sort of coincidence or
Yeah.
something happens. But this particular age group of women, and they're not physically, they don't all look the same. It's not like they're all blonde or they're all,
Mhm.
dark haired. There are differences. They're not all white. They're not all um, another another ethnicity, but they say the pattern of this many middle-aged women going just missing without a trace
Yeah.
is very unusual.
Yeah.
So it's like I said something to my son or whatever. He's like, well, don't go out alone. And I'm just thinking, like, it's the weirdest thing to think
Yeah.
about at my age, that
Mhm.
you shouldn't. It's like, doesn't I don't think I take that advice seriously. I don't
Yeah.
know, but it feels very, 'cause I'm not scared when I go out. I'm pretty aware of my surroundings, but so were these women, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I know
So,
it
yeah.
that is scary. Cause even too, like, I mean, my oldest daughter, every time she leaves the house, I have, like, a little bit of a panic attack. So I'm like, "There's some crazy people out there."
There,
So,
yeah,
like,
truly.
be
Yeah.
safe, like, stay in contact,
Yeah.
let me know what you're doing, where you're at, keep your location on, like,
But
um
it's so hard to not be overly,
yeah.
like, I know if I let myself think about it too much with my
Mhm.
girls, like, I'll be on the phone. They live in another city, and I'll be like,
Uh-huh.
"Are you okay?" And they're like, "What are you talking about?"
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Well, clearly,
I
I'll,
just
like
have to turn that part of my brain off,
yeah,
and say I've
I
done all that I can do.
yeah, I try, like, I mean, she's really good about keeping in contact with me and stuff like that, so, that makes me feel good, so it doesn't seem
Mhm.
like there'd be a huge window, but still, I said, like, anything can happen, anything, like, people are nuts, and so I'm always like, "Make sure you
Yeah.
know who you're with, where you are, like, don't ever go anywhere alone," but, yeah, like,
Yeah.
I will say this,
Yeah.
one time and this is not like am some expert in what it feels like to lose somebody and have them disappear, but in these moments, I did. Cleary
Mm.
was 2 years old, and we had just moved into a brand new house. And we had just actually gotten back from British Columbia and we were there for a visit and we just had gotten home and it was early in the morning. My husband takes our dogs out and for some reason he took them out the front door and he thought he shut it. All of a sudden, we have no idea where she is. Like no idea. And we had like the knobs on our door and stuff like that. So he thinks that he mustn't have like shut it properly or whatever. But she got out and
Mm.
I have never in my life felt such panic and absolutely desperation and alone. Because I felt like one person in the middle of 7 billion people who were just not looking for this kid, right? Like, and
Mhm.
I start running down the street and I'm freaking out. And we live in a new area. Like there's basements that are dug, there's lumber, there's all sorts of stuff going on and I'm freaking out. And my husband's on his bike and he's riding his bike and I'm just running down the street. Like I'm running frantic. And at the time, my dad actually just lived like two little streets up. Like there was like I think oh no, like one cul-de-sac in between us. And I ran to my dad's house and I start banging on the door. And my brother, who's a wee kid at the time, I think he was like 12 or whatever. Like he wasn't very old and he's holding her. And
Oh my
I start
gosh.
bawling my eyes out because I'm like, what
Ugh.
happened? And here I grab her. I don't even say anything to him. I just grab her and I start walking home and I'm crying and I'm crying. And I notice all these people out on their yards gardening and stuff. And I was like, nobody noticed a 2-year-old walking around in a diaper and a blanket with their hair
Mm.
all
Mhm.
disheveled. And here I get home and my brother had left me a message and he was like, "Am I supposed to babysit Clary?" And here she had walked all the way to my parents' house,
Oh
knocked
my
on the
gosh.
door, and my brother just happened to be going upstairs to go to the bathroom, and he heard this little knock at the door, and she was standing there. And
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
so I mean, like, not that I, like I said, like, I'm not some expert in knowing what it feels like to have somebody missing in your life forever, because I just couldn't imagine. But in those moments, I could certainly relate to the despair that you feel, because I was like, I don't even know what to
Oh,
do. I didn't even know what to do in those moments. And it was the scariest thing I've ever felt. And I think that that may
mm.
be why I get a little bit more, kind of crazy about, like, where are you? What are you
Yeah,
doing? Who are you
hyper
with?
vigilant for sure,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
like,
no, I think you
yeah,
I think it's a good thing.
yeah. But it's,
Yeah.
yeah, like, it's not a great feeling. And what's crazy is, like, you think that I would have learned from that the first time. And somehow she got out again. And it took like a matter of
She like
seconds.
a locksmith or
I
what?
don't know what. I was like, what? But all of a sudden I go outside, and at the time we had our dog, and she was like, when she would get out of the house, she would take off. Like Lexi would just go. Like she was a boxer. She would run and run and run. I come out of the house and I see Clary riding her little tricycle up the street, and our dog's just trotting next to her, and there's these two ladies who were following her, and I think trying to see where she was going. But here I was banging on my neighbor's door thinking that she just went over to the neighbor's house, because she was like, she always said hi to them, and
Yeah.
whatever. And nope, she was riding her bike out in the middle of
Out
the
there doing
street.
her thing.
And I looked like a great
Uh,
parent yet again. So
uh we didn't have it. We had a situation like that, but it didn't go. It was like wasn't as scary, but could have been.
mhm.
And it was Trevor and I when we were watching TV downstairs, and all of a sudden we hear the doorbell ring, and we're like, "Who the hell is coming over at 9 o'clock at night?" It's still light
Yeah,
out, but you
yeah.
just don't ring someone's doorbell,
No.
right? Like, we go upstairs and hear our son Isaac. He's like 3 or 4, standing out there in his pajamas ringing the doorbell, and we're like, what? Like, thank God
Yeah.
it was summer, so it was still
Uh-huh.
light out and it wasn't middle of winter. But yeah, he had gone. We don't know how long he was out there. I tell myself it couldn't have been very long, but he couldn't get back in, so he's ringing the doorbell to
Oh,
come in, and we're
yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
what? Like,
Yeah. Like,
yeah,
how
scary.
did they get out? Like, how did that happen? Like, I just,
How
in my mind, I took all of the right
uh
measures. I had the knob, like you couldn't turn the knobs, and all the doors were always locked and stuff. So I'm like, I don't know. And of course she was too young to sort of explain herself, but yeah.
yeah, tell. And you're like, stay home, and she's like, why? This is fun.
Damn kids.
Well, it's funny. I'm gonna read a listener like one or yeah, like a listener story because it actually ties in so good to what you're talking
Oh
about
yeah.
here. But it's titled "Lost in a Mall," so or
Oh.
"Lost in the Mall." So it's exactly. It says, "Hey, I'm Ben. When I was 8 years old, my mom took me to the mall in 1985. I was, excuse me, super excited because it meant candy, arcade games, and best of all, a giant toy store. My was always really organized, but this day she got a little distracted. She said Timmy. I thought it said his name was Ben. She said, "Stay right here while I just pop into the store for a minute," and off she went, disappearing into the sea of adults with big shopping bags. I was left standing by the fountain in the middle of the mall. It was so cool. With all the coins shimmering in the water, I threw in a penny and wished for a toy robot. While waiting, I decided to explore. Of course, the kid would.
Right? Who doesn't?
Uh, yeah, I decided to explore. I found an arcade and played a game of Pac Man, then went to the toy store and stared longingly at the shelves full of robots, dinosaurs, and action figures. That'd be like torture.
All right.
After what felt like an epic adventure, I spotted my mom coming back with a bunch of shopping bags. She looked like she'd been searching everywhere for me. Turns out she'd been caught up looking for a birthday gift and didn't realize she was gone for over an hour. When she saw me, she rushed over, picked me up, and gave me the biggest hug. She apologized like a million times and I just laughed. I was too busy showing off my new robot that I'd gotten from a surprise trip to the toy store thanks to some extra quarters I found in the arcade. Mom promised to never leave me alone in the mall again, and from then on, every trip to the mall was an adventure. Just with a bit more parental supervision. That's cute. Oh
um,
my gosh, but it reminds me of when I was a kid. We lived on this farm, like a ranch or like an acreage. And my dog, Patrick, was my best friend. I loved my dog, Patrick. He was a border collie. And it was like we were allowed to roam the property even young. Like we were out there
mhm.
and doing our thing. And their parents never too worried about us because not like we'd go that far. We were on our own land, whatever. And I fell asleep in the doghouse. So I'd crawled into
Oh,
the doghouse with Patrick, and it was nice and warm, and it was raining outside, and I just fell asleep. And I woke up to people screaming, like
oh,
for my screaming my name. There was like, I think there was for sure neighbors and maybe even police, and they were all searching the property. I almost didn't come out of the doghouse because I thought I'd be in so much trouble. But
yeah.
it wasn't on purpose, but yeah, I'd
Mhm.
fallen asleep and didn't know. And yeah, they were looking everywhere for me. I couldn't have been more than about 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah, it'd
that's
be so scary.
yeah. I don't think that ever happened. I don't think I ever did anything like that. But I don't think I went to the mall much. So, you know, I
Yeah.
think it was like a big treat, to go. I do remember one time, like Granny Carol, she took me to Granville Street and she like let me stay home from school. And it was like this just big, amazing time. And it was like, this
Oh
is so,
yeah.
and I got to bring a friend with me and, all that stuff. And it was like this really great day because it was like you never got to do anything like that. Go out
Yeah.
and kind of, you
An
know,
adventure.
yeah. And now I'm like, I don't want to go to the mall at all.
Yeah, yeah.
you know?
Oh, yeah, in and out. That's
Yeah.
it. I think I lived in Nanaimo for 2 years before I ever went into the mall, before I even realized
Oh.
there was a mall. I just didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not my thing. That's for
Yeah.
sure. But
Well, how's that? I think we're
yeah,
done for the day.
I think we
Another
are good.
episode wrapped.
Wrapped
Any last words for all of our 12 listeners?
for our well, now we just lost one. Okay? Because they
Oh,
listened to this
oh no.
episode and so like they're done. They're
Yeah,
over
they're like,
it.
we're out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I have absolutely no words except for see you next time.
Or
See you.
was it subscribe, like, rewind?
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know.
yeah,
I
we're
don't
not
know
doing that
anymore.
again.
No, it's there.
All
You
right.
know.
Goodbye. Good
Goodbye.
night.
Good
Goodbye.
night.
Talk to
Goodbye.
you soon.
Yeah.